Let's be honest. Sometimes a woman can think about you far more than she ever admits, and the strangest part is that the strongest clues usually appear when she isn't trying to impress you at all. It might be something incredibly small, a message that seems unnecessary, a question she already knows the answer to, a memory she suddenly brings up, the way she notices a tiny change in your mood, or the way she somehow finds a reason to appear in your world without directly saying, "I was thinking about you." And if you're not paying attention, you'll dismiss all of it. That's where most men get confused. They look for obvious signs, constant texting, obvious compliments, dramatic declarations. But human attention doesn't always work that way. When someone occupies your thoughts, your mind begins creating little pathways back to that person. You notice things that remind you of them. You remember conversations that should have been forgotten. You become curious about what they're doing, how they're feeling, and whether they still think about you. And sometimes that curiosity quietly leaks into behavior. Imagine she hears a song you once mentioned. Suddenly she remembers you. She passes a place you visited together. Your face crosses her mind. Someone says something that sounds like one of your jokes. She smiles before she even realizes why. Then, instead of simply letting the thought disappear, she reaches out. Not necessarily with some dramatic confession. Maybe she sends you a random message. Maybe she reacts to something you posted. Maybe she asks how something turned out that you mentioned days ago. That detail matters, because when someone remembers the small things about you, it can reveal something deeper than simple politeness. It can mean that your conversations are being stored with emotional significance. But here's the part men often misunderstand. One isolated behavior proves almost nothing. A friendly message doesn't automatically mean attraction. A smile doesn't guarantee romantic interest. A woman remembering something you said could simply mean she has a good memory. The real clue is the pattern. Does she repeatedly create little bridges back to you? Does she find reasons to continue conversations after the practical reason is already gone? Does she seem unusually curious about your life? Does she remember details you barely remember telling her? Does she bring up moments between you that seemed insignificant at the time? When these behaviors appear consistently, you may be looking at something more meaningful, mental and emotional attention, and that's what I want you to understand. You don't need to chase every signal. You don't need to interrogate her. You don't need to convince yourself that every glance means something. Instead, become observant. Watch what repeats, because genuine interest rarely announces itself with a giant spotlight. More often, it appears quietly, through attention, curiosity, consistency, and the subtle ways someone keeps returning to you. And when you learn to recognize those patterns without becoming obsessed with them, you stop guessing. You start understanding. Here's something most men overlook. When you're genuinely on a woman's mind, she may not always move closer. Sometimes she becomes more observant. She starts noticing details she once ignored. Maybe you change your hairstyle. She notices. You sound slightly different on a phone call. She asks if something is wrong. You stop posting as often. She becomes curious about where you've been. You mention a new interest, and somehow, days later, she remembers it. None of these moments should be treated like undeniable proof of attraction. But when they form a consistent pattern, they reveal something important. You have become psychologically relevant to her. Think about your own mind. When someone matters to you, your brain gives them priority. Their words stay with you longer. Their habits become familiar. You recognize their mood faster. Even small changes can stand out because your attention has already been trained to notice them. The same principle applies to women. And sometimes the biggest clue isn't what she says, it's what she remembers. You casually tell her about an interview you have next week. A few days later, she asks, "How did it go?" You mention that you were thinking about trying a new hobby. Weeks later, she brings it up again. You tell her about something that bothered you, and later she checks whether things got better. That kind of memory can indicate that your conversations weren't just background noise. She listened, she processed it, and somewhere in her mind, that information stayed. Now be careful here, because this is where insecurity can ruin everything. A man notices one small sign and immediately builds an entire story around it. She remembered my favorite movie. She must be obsessed with me. No, slow down. Confidence isn't believing every positive interpretation. Confidence is being able to observe without desperately needing a particular outcome. If she remembers details, let that information exist without forcing it into a conclusion. Then look for consistency. Does she remember only things that directly affect her, or does she remember things connected specifically to you? Does she ask follow-up questions? Does she bring old conversations back into new ones? Does she notice changes in your behavior without being told? And most importantly, does her attention feel reciprocal? Because real connection is rarely one-sided. There's another subtle behavior you should notice. She may reference you when you aren't even there. Maybe a friend mentions a topic, and your name somehow enters the conversation. Maybe she says, "That reminds me of something you told me." Maybe she sees something and thinks, "He would probably find this funny." That doesn't necessarily mean she has romantic feelings, but it does mean you occupy mental space. And mental space matters. People don't repeatedly connect unrelated moments to someone who has become completely irrelevant to them. So instead of asking, "Does she secretly want me?" ask a better question. Am I becoming someone she naturally thinks about? That question gives you clarity without desperation. Because attraction can fluctuate, interest can grow or disappear. But attention leaves patterns, and if she keeps noticing you, remembering you, and finding natural reasons to reconnect with you, don't ignore the pattern. Just don't chase it either. Stay grounded, let her behavior speak. Because when you stop trying to force an answer, you become much better at seeing the truth. There's another sign that can be even more revealing than remembering your words. She starts creating unnecessary reasons to interact with you. And I mean unnecessary. Not because she needs something important, not because there's an obvious problem to solve, but because some small part of her simply wants another moment of connection. Maybe she sends you a funny picture with no explanation. Maybe she asks your opinion about something she could easily decide herself. Maybe she brings up an old conversation just to keep the interaction alive. Maybe she starts telling you something, reaches the end of the story, and somehow finds another subject before the conversation can naturally end. Pay attention to that, because when someone enjoys your presence, communication stops being purely functional. There is no longer just a reason, there is also a desire, and sometimes that desire appears in incredibly ordinary ways. She might say, "Have you seen this?" You answer, "The conversation should end." But then she asks another question. You answer that. Then she tells you something unrelated, and suddenly a 2-minute interaction becomes 20 minutes. Again, one conversation means very little, but repeated behavior tells a different story. When a person keeps extending interactions, they may be communicating something without consciously planning to communicate anything at all. They simply enjoy being connected, and that distinction matters, because men often assume that if a woman is interested, she will make everything obvious, but many people are cautious with emotional vulnerability. They may not want to risk rejection, they may not know exactly what they feel, they may be testing whether the connection feels safe, or they may simply enjoy talking to you and be curious about where the relationship could go. That's why you should never turn subtle behavior into a demand for certainty. Instead, notice whether her effort meets yours. If you initiate every conversation, carry every topic, and constantly keep the connection alive while she gives minimal energy back, that's not the same thing. But if she independently returns, initiates, asks questions, remembers details, and keeps finding natural opportunities to interact, the picture becomes much more interesting. There's also something deeper happening here. People tend to seek familiarity. When someone makes us feel comfortable, understood, entertained, or emotionally energized, our minds naturally become more likely to return to that experience. That doesn't mean she is sitting alone thinking about you every minute. Real psychology isn't that dramatic. It means you may have become associated with a certain emotional experience. Maybe she feels understood when she talks to you. Maybe she laughs more around you. Maybe conversations with you feel effortless. Maybe she feels that she can be herself. Those emotional associations can become powerful, and that's why sometimes she reaches out without even fully understanding why. She simply notices something and thinks of you. The mature man doesn't exploit that. He doesn't manipulate her emotions. He doesn't disappear just to make her chase. He doesn't play games designed to create anxiety. He simply remains authentic and watches whether the connection develops naturally, because the goal isn't to make someone obsess over you. The goal is to recognize genuine mutual interest when it exists. And if she keeps creating little doors back into your life, don't rush through them. Notice them. Let the conversation breathe. Give her room to show you whether those moments are random or part of a consistent pattern. Sometimes the clearest answer isn't hidden in what she says. It's hidden in how often she chooses to return. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood signs. She becomes curious about your life even when there is no obvious reason for her to be. Not invasive curiosity, not interrogation, something much quieter. She wants to know what you've been doing. She asks how your day went. She remembers something you had planned. She notices when your routine changes. She might casually ask who you were with, what you thought about something, or whether you ever followed through on that goal you mentioned weeks ago. And sometimes she disguises curiosity as casual conversation. Still going to the gym? How did that project turn out? Did you ever go to that place you were talking about? On the surface, these questions seem ordinary, but remember this: questions reveal attention. When someone repeatedly asks about your world, they are investing mental energy into understanding it. That doesn't automatically mean romantic attraction. A naturally caring person may behave this way with friends, family, and colleagues. So again, look at the pattern. Does she ask questions and genuinely listen to the answers? Does she remember what you told her? Does she build new conversations around information you previously shared? Does she seem interested in who you are rather than simply what you can provide? That last question is crucial because genuine interest is different from convenience. Someone who wants something from you usually focuses on the benefit. Someone who is becoming emotionally interested often becomes curious about the person, your opinions, your ambitions, your experiences, your frustrations, the things that make you laugh, the things you care about when nobody is watching. And there's another subtle clue. Sometimes she may react differently when she realizes other people are interested in you, not necessarily with dramatic jealousy. It might be a sudden question, a change in tone, unexpected curiosity about who someone is, or a playful comment about another woman. Again, don't manufacture jealousy where none exists. But if her attention noticeably increases when your romantic availability becomes uncertain, that can be worth observing. Why? Because uncertainty can reveal value. When something feels permanently available, the mind can take it for granted. When that certainty changes, attention often increases. But here's where emotionally mature men separate themselves from insecure men. An insecure man tries to create jealousy deliberately. He posts things to provoke her. He talks about other women just to get a reaction. He disappears to make her wonder. He creates confusion and calls it attraction. A grounded man does the opposite. He lives his life. He maintains his standards. He stays socially active. He has goals outside of romance. And if she becomes more curious because she realizes he isn't waiting around for her attention, he doesn't exploit that curiosity. He simply notices it. Because attraction built through manipulation is fragile. Connection built through authenticity has a chance to become real. And there's something else you should understand. When you occupy someone's thoughts, they may start comparing new experiences with memories of you. A restaurant reminds her of a conversation. A song reminds her of your taste. A phrase reminds her of something you once said. A situation makes her wonder what your opinion would be. That is how mental associations work. You become connected to experiences beyond the moments you actually shared. And if she repeatedly brings those associations back into your conversations, you may have become more psychologically significant than you realize. But don't obsess over proving it. The moment you need constant confirmation, you lose your ability to see clearly, watch, listen, notice consistency, and let her actions reveal whether the connection is actually moving in both directions. Because the most powerful sign isn't that she occasionally thinks about you, it's that she repeatedly chooses to bring you back into her world. Here's where things become more emotionally revealing. Sometimes, when you are genuinely on her mind, she starts sharing parts of herself that she doesn't casually share with everyone. Not necessarily some dramatic confession. It can be a small story about her childhood, a fear she normally keeps private, a frustration she has been carrying, a dream she hasn't told many people about, or even something she feels slightly embarrassed admitting, and you might wonder, why is she telling me this? Sometimes the answer is simple. She feels safe enough to let you see behind the polished version of herself. That doesn't automatically mean she wants a relationship with you. Emotional openness can exist between friends, family members, and people who simply trust each other. But when vulnerability appears alongside consistent attention, curiosity, effort, and emotional connection, it becomes much more meaningful because people usually protect what feels vulnerable. They don't hand access to their inner world to everyone, and when someone repeatedly chooses you as the person they talk to, something is happening. You have become associated with emotional safety. Think about the difference between someone saying, "My day was busy," and someone explaining why the day affected them. One gives you information, the other gives you access. That difference matters. And sometimes she may reveal something personal, then quickly change the subject. You might even notice a little hesitation. That hesitation can be telling. It may mean she is wondering whether she revealed too much. Maybe she is watching your reaction. Does he judge me? Does he understand? Does he care? Will he remember this? Your response matters more than you realize. If you mock her vulnerability, interrupt her, or immediately turn the conversation into a story about yourself, you teach her that opening up to you is unsafe. But if you listen without trying to control the moment, something different happens. Trust grows, and trust can create a deeper emotional bond than constant flirting ever could. There's another behavior worth noticing. After sharing something personal, she may later return to the subject. She might say, "I was thinking about what we talked about," or she may ask what you thought about it. That means the conversation didn't simply disappear when it ended, it continued inside her mind. And that is exactly what this entire topic comes down to. You are not looking for one magical signal. You are looking for evidence that interactions with you have psychological weight. Does she remember? Does she return? Does she ask? Does she open up? Does she notice? Does she make room for you? And does she do these things consistently? Because emotional significance leaves traces, but I want you to hear something that may save you from a lot of unnecessary pain. Being on someone's mind does not automatically mean you should pursue them. Someone can think about you and still be uncertain. Someone can care about you and still not be ready. Someone can feel attracted to you and still decide that a relationship isn't right. That's why your goal should never be to decode a woman until you become addicted to analyzing her. Your goal is clarity. If she consistently shows interest, give the connection space to develop. If she gives mixed signals, don't build a fantasy around the best ones. And if she repeatedly gives you nothing, respect that too. A confident man doesn't need to force meaning into silence. He pays attention to reality. Because the most attractive form of confidence isn't believing every woman wants you. It's knowing you can handle the truth, whatever that truth turns out to be. Now bring everything together, because the biggest mistake you can make is becoming obsessed with decoding every little thing she does. If she remembers your stories, finds reasons to talk, asks about your life, notices changes, shares personal details, and repeatedly returns to conversations with you, there may be a strong pattern of attention. But the real question is not, how do I make her think about me more? The better question is, what kind of connection are we actually building? That shift changes everything. You stop chasing signs and start watching behavior. You stop trying to create jealousy and start building a life you genuinely respect. You stop analyzing every message and start paying attention to consistency, and if she truly has you on her mind, you won't need to manipulate her into proving it. She will naturally create opportunities to connect, maybe not perfectly, maybe not every day, but consistently enough for you to notice. So here's your personal equation. Her attention plus her consistency plus your authenticity equals the truth about your connection. Tell me in the comments, what is one thing she does that makes you feel like you're on her mind? And remember, don't judge the entire story from one moment. Look for patterns. If this video helped you understand relationships with more clarity, hit like, subscribe for more psychology and relationship insights, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it.